This is Gemara Rosh HaShanah Daf Chaf. A little learning should be a tremendous chos Ilin Nishmasa for Ilin Nishama, for Rav Moshe ben Rav Chaim Alevi, whose yahrzeit was about a week ago in Yudal Cheshvan. The learning the entire Chabur should be a tremendous chos for his neshama and as well for Rav Eli and the entire family, as well as a choshidach b'Yisrael Chaim and Devar Shemiriam Bas Yisrael Gidol Shan Letzv Shanamak Al Yomordechai Ben Darshinda Zgidol Bas Davashendel, as well as chos for Oshem Mishal Yisman Yafrei Pesach Binyamin Ben Simon Zelda Fani Vego Chaim and Sarah Shlomo Sivan Reiz Zar Bas Kenan Lik Tabasiyam Maschei Yisrael Mindel Rezu Shalei Shamas Naomi Bashavi Sheikhana Shmo Batira Tniyam Khanrizim Chaim Asin Al Yinin Bashin Min Asviv Vegover Nechalas Shon Zelahu Rivka Bas Hashem Zalzim Chlester Be'Say Shar Chayli Yisrael. We're holding on New Testament bees. We're about 12 lines from the bottom. First word in line is Ratzah. We're up to Hayid Rav Yeshua ben Levi, continuing the discussion about the different leap months, different months of Adar, etc. This daf, today's daf, Rosh HaShanah Daf Chaf, is an extremely famous daf, as we'll see in Chafam and Beis, as it might allude to the worldwide machlaikas about the international dateline, whether there is a allusion to in the Gemara as a tremendous machlaikas Rishayim already, and how to go about that. Lamaisa, of course, is going to be well beyond the scope of this year. But just to know that Rosh HaShanah Daf Chaf and Beis will point out where is one of the tremendous sources in the Gemara. But before we get to there, we have to continue. Says the Gemara, Hey Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, again about 12 lines from the bottom of Yutas Beis. Mishab Gehel Kadosh Yerushalayim, from the great congregation of Yerushalayim. Al Shnei Adarim, he gave testimony with regard to two Adars. Shemekach Neisam B'Yomi Bureim, that he gave testimony and he said that when you mekadesh them, the 2 months of Adar, on the 30th day, that is when we make them into the Iber, the leap month. Explains the Gemara. Does this mean that we only make it chaser? We don't make it full? What's going on? What exactly was this edus from the Kal Kadisha and Yerushalayim? And the Gemara now explains from the flip side. Lafukim in the Darish, Rav Nachman bar Chasida, this is coming to argue with that which Rav Nachman bar Chasida taught to eat Rabbi Simai Mishum Chagi Zachariah Malachi. A testimony straight from Chagi Zachariah Malachi. I don't know how many times Gemara we have a testimony from Nevi'im Al Shnei Adarim, on the two Adar Shem Ratzu Lasois Shneim Aleim Oisin. If you want to make both of them months full, you could. Shneim Chaserim, you want to make them both Chaser lacking Oisin. Echad Mali Echad Chaser Oisin. So now we understand the contrast. Rav Yeshua ben Levi was giving testimony, it's always going to be full. Whereas Chagei, Zechariah, and Malachi are telling us, no, it could be full, it could be not, or it could be both. It could be either one. And says the Gemara of Akachaya Noyagin, and that is how they were Noyag Begoyla in Galus, Umisham Rabbeinu Amar. That's number one. And that's how they were Noyig in Galus. They were Noyig like Chagi Zechariah Malachi, that it was either all, none, or some. Says the Gemara, Umisham Rabbeinu Amar, by the name of Rabbeinu, referring to Rav, they said, really, it's always Malay. If you have two Adars, like this year, we're going to have two Adars this year. One is Malay, one is Chaser. Unless you know, it's always going to follow the pattern of full and half, unless you know that the second Adar was on the 30th day, and thereby the first Adar was Chaser. So again, Rav is teaching us it's always going to be Malay Chaser, unless you found out that on the 30th day of the first Adar, they made a Rosh Chodesh. What does that mean? That means that the first Adar was only 29 days, was Chaser. If you don't know, then we assume it follows the pattern, but if not, that's if you heard such testimony. Says the Gemara further, Shalach le'le Mar Ukva, they sent to Mar Ukva, Adar asamach Nisan, Loilum Chaser. Another rule, the Adar Samach L'Nisan, that means either an Adar in every year, or that means Adar Beis, the second Adar in this year. Says Marok, for the testimony he received, is that it's always going to be Chaser. It's always going to be 29 days. Masiv Rav Nachman, ask Rav Nachman 1 second. Al Shnei Chadoshim Mechalin is a Shabbos. Our Mishnah. What do we say in our Mishnah? On 2 months, not our Mishnah. On 2 months, Mishnah on Chaf Aleph in 2 days, the beginning of the next parak. On 2 months, Machal Shabbos, regarding to testifying about the new month, of course, Bisman Beis Hamikdash, Bisman Chazal, they would have the Eidim come in, which we're going to talk about more in the second parak, and testify about the new month. On 2 months, they're Machal Shabbos, they desecrate Shabbos to get the Beis Din in order to make sure that Rosh Chodesh was on the right time. On what 2 months? Al Nisan v'al Tishrei. On Nisan and Tishrei. So explains the Gemara. If you're going to tell me that sometimes the Adar closest to Nisan is fall 30, sometimes it's Chaser 29, therefore I understand. Now I understand why on Nisan, the next month, they have to be Mechal Shabbos in order to make sure you got the right date. Because you don't know the previous month, was it 29 or 30? However, based on what you just said, as we turn over to today's Daf Chav, Eli Amri, but if you're correct, and that which you just said, that Lo Olam Chaser on the Tabu Chavam and Aleph, if it's always Chaser, if it's always 29 days, Amay Mechalinan. What? Whoa, excuse me. Pardon? Amay Mechalinan. Why do you have to be Mechalel? It's simple. If it's always 29 days, there's no reason. We'll always know what day Rosh Chodesh Nisan will be. Answers the Gemara, fascinating teretz, which is a bit eye-opening and begins us into the sugya of being Mekadesh, the new month with Eidim. Says the Gemara, 2 lines down, Chafam and Aleph, Mishom, the mitzvah lekadesh al riyah. There's a special mitzvah, even though it comes out. We know what day Rosh Chodesh is going to be, because we know according to this opinion that the previous month is 29 days, it's day 30, today is going to be Rosh Chodesh. But because there's a mitzvah to be mekadesh through riyah, meaning there's a mitzvah for the Eidim to come in and say, we saw it with the new month, Kizerei v'kadesh, we saw the new moon, for that mitzvah, or Mechal Shabbos. Absolutely fascinating. Says the Gemara, Iket Yamri, Allah in which Rav Nachman, we're going to flip around the previous Gemara. Now Rav Nachman is not asking a question. Rav Nachman is bringing a proof. Shabbos, next Mishnah teaches us for 2 months. If you're going to tell me the both Chaser, then I understand why you're Mechal. Why? We know what day it is. Oh, like we just said, again, before's answer, now is the proof. Because of the mitzvah. Eliyamr is in the Mali's in the Chaser, my Mechalinan. If it's sometimes Malay, sometimes Chaser, why are you Mechal Shabbos? What's the big deal if we're going that it's not necessarily a mitzvah to be Mekadesh new moon? So what's the big deal? Make it a full month today, and tomorrow they'll be Mekadesh it. Why are they going at length to be Mechal Shabbos for the sighting of the new moon? It must be, the proof is that really we know what the Rosh Chodesh is. They're doing it specifically for the mitzvah. Says the Gemara, no raya. 7 lines down, Chavam and Aleph, Ida Akla Yom Shleishim B'Shabbos, Hachanami. You're right. If the 30th day was precisely Shabbos, then you'd be right. Even according to this answer, there still is a mitzvah, and therefore there is no proof. And therefore we're concluding right now that if you want to hold that the Adar right before Nisan, whether it's Adar Beis, whether it's Adar in a regular year, is 29 days. What is the reason? The reason is because there's a mitzvah, Lekadesh ala Re'iyah. There's a mitzvah, a special commandment, a special positive commandment, I should say, a mitzvah, for the Eidim to come in and give testimony about the new moon. Says the Gemara, let's discuss this thing. Masiv Rav Kahana. Kshamekadesh Kayim. When the base, that was terrible. One more time. Kshamikdash Kayim. I'm sorry. When the Beis Hamikdash was around, Mechalin Af Al Kulan. Says Rav Kahana, when there was a Beis Hamikdash, we're Mechalil Shabbos to testify always. Why? Because we have to know what day the carbon for Rosh Chodesh is going to be brought, because on Rosh Chodesh we have a carbon musaf, and it has to be at the right time. So for every single month, we're Mechal Shabbos in order to know what day Rosh Chodesh is. What did Rav Kahana just teach us? That the reason is because of the carbon. When there's a Beis Hamikdash, he didn't say that the reason is because of the mitzvah to Mekadesh through the sighting of the new moon. So articulates the Gemara. Seemingly Nisan and Tishrei should be the same thing. And so now the Gemara explains that now let's go back. If it would be true that the Adar before Nisan, sometimes it's 29, sometimes it's 30, now we go back to the original statement. And I understand, I don't know what day Rosh Chodesh is. Says, I don't know what day Rosh Chodesh is. I have to Mechal Shabbos for the Eidim to come. to Yofta. Again, the Gemara just proved beautifully. We assumed at the top of the Amid that the reason the Eidim are being Machal Shabbos is for the mitzvah. And we said a fascinating idea for a mitzvah you're Machal Shabbos. But the Gemara proves it can't be, because Rav Kahana taught us that in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, why are they Machal Shabbos? Said Rav Kahana in the Brisa explicitly, for the Karbanos. Why? Why did Rav Kahana say simply for the mitzvah? Seemingly it's not because of the mitzvah, and thereby the dominoes fall that what happens is that it says, well, that the Adar before Nisan can't always be Chaser, must be sometimes Mali, sometimes Chaser, sometimes 30, sometimes 29 days. Says the Gemara, we're on the last narrow line, Ki Asa Ula Amar. When Ula came, Ula was coming from Babel to Eretz Yisrael. We're on the first Y line. Now the Gemara is going to go into the month of Elul. Evrua le'Elul, said Ula, Ki Asa Ula, when Ula came, Amar Abrua le'Elul. He said, Elul, I just came from Eretz Yisrael. They made Elul a full month. They made it 30 days. Amar Ula says, Ula, Yadi Chavrim Bevloi Maiti Vusa Avdinan. Do my friends here in Babylonia, do my friends here in Bavel, do they understand the good taiva that they did for us by making Elul full? Again, Ula walks in, straight off the plane or the boat, camel, from Eretz Yisrael. It says, by the way, guys, they made Elul a full month. And do you realize how good that is for us? Says the Gemara, Mighty Vusa. What do you mean? What is so special? Why is Bavel gaining so incredibly? What's Ula referring to? The fact that Elul is a full month. Says the Gemara, Ula Amar Misham Yerkaya, Rav Bar Chananya Amar Misham Mesaya. Two reasons. Explains the Gemara, either Misham Yerkaya for the vegetables, Misham Mesaya for the dead. Let's take one moment, even though it's a little bit late, let's take a moment to pause and look at Rashi. Rashi is about 20 lines before the white lines. Misham Yerakaya, says Rashi, Lahafrid Shabbos v'Yontif Zemizeh. It's going to separate Shabbos and Yontif. Kedei shelo yechmoishu ha'yirakos and achalos k'shein chayim. The vegetables you eat raw, they're not going to spoil b'Shabbos shachar Yontif v'Yontif shachar Shabbos. The fact that they make Elul 30 days, what it's going to now happen, Yontif and Shabbos will not be back to back. And they had no refrigeration, so if Yontif and Shabbos was back to back, all the vegetables would go bad. So it says, Yaula, a wonderful taiva they did for us. Whereas Rav Chanina says Misham Mesaya, one Marashi, that they separated Shabbos from Yom Kippur, because now we know that the Mesim will not spoil, because you won't have to wait 2 days. And therefore, says the Gemara, that is the reason why Ula was so thrilled with the fact that they made Elul 30 days in Eretz Yisrael. Back into the Gemara on the third Y line, My Beinayu. What's the practical difference between these two reasons, whether it's the vegetables or the dead bodies? Yom Kippur, Shachal Yois Acher Shabbos. Yom Kippur that falls on a Sunday. The one that says that the reason we would make Elul 30 days is because of the Mesim Ma'avrin. That's going to apply here as well, Yom Kippur on Sunday. Excuse me. According to the other man, the Amar, Ula that said the reason is because of the vegetables. Le'emas kabayila. When do you need the vegetables? L'orta. You need the vegetables after Yom Kippur on Sunday night. L'orta tarachumaisi. At night you'll go and get new veggies. So if you hold that the reason you make Elul a full month is in order to separate Shabbos from Yontif, not to have back to back on Yom Kippur on a Sunday would be the difference. For a mace we would separate it, but for the vegetables we would not, because you could just go pick your fresh veggies. Ask the Gemara 1 second. It's true that Ula holds that the impetus was veggies, but why doesn't he agree with the other answer about the mace? Ella explains the Gemara. You know the difference is Yontav hasamuch leShabbos. In a case when Yontav is next to Shabbos, being middle of now, being lachrel, because you need your fresh vegetables. They're going to spoil between Yontav and Shabbos. No big deal. This is not a reason to make Elul an extra day. Why? Efshir be'amimi. A concept that we saw back in the Gemara in Beya, that you're able to bury the dead corpses on Yom Tif via a guy. And therefore, there would be no reason to make the month a leap month. Ask the Gemara the same question we said before, now in the reverse. So good, you're right. There's no issue of mason. There's no issue of the corpse is spoiling because the Goyim can take care of it. But why don't you hold up the other reason of the vegetables? Answers the Gemara, no. You know why? You could soak the vegetables in hot water. Explains Rashi. Apparently, that's a way that it made them come back to life. They wouldn't be dead and wilting anymore by putting hot water in it. I don't understand what I just said, but that's what Rashi says. And on Yantiv, you get the hot water, and therefore there is no problem. Says the Gemara, okay, beautiful explanation. Two different reasons why they were happy that they made Elul a full month. Why was this something that was good for us in Bavel? Ula came here in Bavel. Wow, this is great. This is good even for them over there in Eretz Yisrael. Explains the Gemara, Letidan Chavalan Alma. For us, it's so hot. It's a hot climate in Babel. It's not so hot in Eretz Yisrael, so it's not such a big deal. Asks the Gemara, and that's really the end of part number 1 of Ula, of the reason why we make Elul a full month. Veggies that dead bodies, the difference being Yontif near Shabbos. And just to point out one point which we mentioned back in the Gemara Beya, just it's pertinent to mention again, this whole concept of burying with Goyim on Yontif is not so simple. Bisman Hazeh, Ramesha has a fascinating tshuva where Ramesha says nowadays we have refrigerators, so there's no reason to bury a dead body with a guy on Yontif. It could come to a zilzal, etc. And rather, says Ramesha, has put it in the fridge. There are communities nowadays that do it, but just to mention that one point. Ask the Gemara, what was the whole premise of Ula? The premise of Ula was that for the need of the entire community, for the need of the fresh vegetables, for the need of the dead bodies, we can make a month a full month. On that point, ask the Gemara 10 lines into the white lines, Chafam and Aleph, Eini, is that accurate? Said in the name of Shmuel that I would have thought just like you could make a leap year for the needs of the people, so to a leap month, you can make an extra day, not a 29-day month, but a 30-day month. Talmud Laimar, HaChodesh Hazeh Lochem Rosh Chodashim Kozeh Re'eh V'Kadesh. We darshan the pasuk like this, that you can't go and change around the months. Moshe Rabbeinu is being told by Hashem, this is the month. Don't start changing it for everyone else. So how could it be that Ula was saying that they made it a new month in order for the dead bodies, in order for the vegetables? The whole premise is faulty. Amar Rava, explains Rava, like Kasha kan la'avroi kan likatshoi. Two different concepts. One is, when we're doing is, we're taking a month which is not full, and we're making it full. We're pushing off Rosh Chodesh today. That you're allowed to do. When Moshe Rabbeinu was taught Kazeh Re'eh V'Kadesh, that was to make it early. That you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to make the month early. Vachi Kamer explains the Gemara. Yoch, I would have thought Shem Shavrin is Shana B'Sach Chodesh L'Tzayrech. Just like I could push them off. Kach Mekachin is Chodesh L'Tzayrech. I can make it early. Tamalei Marchel Shazel Kazeh Re'eh V'Kadesh. No, you're not allowed to make it early. And now the Gemara brings a riot to this. We put pressure on the Eidim that saw the new moon in the proper time to make it a full month, to push it off a day. If the Eidim said we didn't see it, we don't put pressure on them to say, you did see it, meaning to make it early. A proof to that which we just said, that we would make it late, we would push it off and make a 30-day month. We will not make it early and make a 29-day month. On this, ask the Gemara, Eini, about 10 lines to the bottom, first one line is Bismanoi. Eini, is that accurate? Vashokli Rav Yehuda Nisiel Rav Ami. Have a Yoidim, you should know, Shekol Yom of Shav Yoichlan, all days of Rav Yoichlan. Hay Malamdenu, you know what Rav Yoichlan would teach us? Ma'ai min ala Eidim ala Chodesh Le'nir Bismanoi Lekadshoi. Rav Yoichlan would say, just like you said not to do. Rav Yoichlan would say that if Eidim said they didn't see the month, we'd say, yes, you did. And they would make Rosh Chodesh early. Avol Bish L'Ra'u. Even though they didn't see it, Yomru Ra'inu, we would tell the Edom, say that you saw it in order to make it early. So what's going on? You just said you can't make it early, but clearly we see you can in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar Abaye, loikash ha-b'nisim v'tishrei, ha-b'shar yarchi. When did Rabbi Yochanan refer to that was Nisan and Tishrei particularly? Then we could do it early. For what reason? Not just for the communal needs, explains Rashi, because of the Yom Tovim. So therefore, we'll even go make Rosh Chodesh early. Whereas, when did Rav Shua ben Levi, what was he referring to when he said that we don't make it early, we only make it late? That was for all the other months, which would be for communal needs? Answer number one. Rava comes along and goes back to the beginning, gives a new teretz. That which Rabbi Shmuel taught is the opinion of the Acherim, which is the opinion that holds you'd be allowed to change around the months for the needs of a community. It's only the din of the Acherim with regard to the vegetables, with regard to the corpses, whereas the Rabbanan would disagree. The Tanya, as we learned in our Brisa, 4 lines at the bottom, Acherim oimrim bin ateres la'ateres in Rosh HaShanah l'Rosh HaShanah el dal yom bilvad, only 4 days. In Rosh HaShanah mubares chamisha, it would be 5 days. So what do we see according to this opinion? I said it backwards. This opinion holds we would not change around the months for the community, whereas the Rabbanan would disagree. Rav Dimi ben Hardai, 2 lines at the bottom, Masni Yibcha, you learned the exact opposite. The exact opposite. My time, where did Rav Dimi get this from? As we turn over to Chafa Mebeis, Hi Mechsi Keshikra, Hi Loi Mechsi Keshikra. When they actually saw the new moon, then it looks like it's a sheker. It looks like a falsehood if they don't make it into a new Rosh Chodesh. But when they don't see it, it doesn't nechsik a shikra. Fascinating idea. Let's explain this for one moment. To make it early, no one will know that you're lying, quote unquote. Why not? Because there's no moon in the sky. So the fact that I made a Rosh Chodesh, everyone will assume, I must have just missed it. But if everyone sees the new moon and they're pushing off Rosh Chodesh one day, that is Mechsik Shikra. Now, just to point out, there's a bit of a problem that's going on over here, that what exactly is going on over here, the Sheker? It sounds like Bezdin is teaching people to lie. We saw on the bottom of Amud Aleph that Rav Yechon would tell them, say that you saw the new moon. And they would say, but we didn't. Say that you did. We need to make Rosh Chodesh. What's going on over here? How can he cause people to lie? And this is a big question that some of the Rishonim ask in the opinion of Rashi, and others want to answer that no, there's no problem of lying if it's done through Bezdin. Fascinating idea. No time for now to elaborate. It is getting late. Omar Shmuel says, Shmuel, Yochilna, and this is where we begin, the difficult part. I know we're already 21 minutes in, but says Shmuel, Yochilnu l'takuni l'choy l'goyla. Says Shmuel, I can fix up everything. I know the constellations, the astrology, I know everything, I can make everything perfect. Really? Yodamar Milsa. Do you know the following statement that Tani learned in a Brisa? The Brisa of Soida Iber. Now, this Brisa of Soida Iber was hidden Bisman Chazal because they didn't want people to know how to make the new months because they were afraid that people would come to think that their Bezdin was playing around. We actually have the Brisa nowadays, and it's not like a Zoyar and Kabbalistic Brisa, it's just difficult calculations. So it says in that Brisa, Noilat Koinim Chatzais, or Noilat Acher Chatzais. It says in that Brisa that there is a difference whether the new moon is born before Chatzais or after Chatzais. Do you know what that means, Shmuel? Amar leiloi, I don't know what that means. Amar leimedahalo yodamar, ikamileachrina dlo yodamar. You obviously don't know other things. You told me 2 lines to the top, I know everything. No, it's not true, because you don't know this statement. And now the Gemara is going to go along to explain what exactly this statement is. So let's just preface for one moment that this line of before Chatzais and after Chatzais, as Rav Zira is now going to explain, we're going to learn the Gemara according to the Pashut Pshat in Rashi, which according to Rashi, this has nothing to do with any date line. This is simply has to do with the Moilad, when the new moon is born, and that is a simple Gemara. Other Rishonim, the Balamar, the Rashba, etc., learn this Gemara completely differently. And they learn that the Gemara is discussing the international date line, and thereby tremendous ramifications. La halacha. We're not going to get involved in that, but there are fabulous material out there. Rabbi Kuber has an incredible book on the international date line. I believe he's actually giving a shiur on it based on this Gemara, and anyone who has the time, sounds like it should be fascinating. But for now, let's get into the Pashut Pshat. What exactly is going on over here? Is the new moon born before Chatzos or after Chatzos? Says the Gemara 6 lines down, Kisalik Rav Zira Shalach Lo. When Rav Zira went to Eretz Yisrael, he sent the following 2 statements. Number 1, that the night and the day have to be the same month. And that is, explains Rav Zira, V'zu Shamar Abba Avud Rav Simlai. That's what he meant. Machavshin told Daisai, Noilad Kaidim Chatzais. We calculate the Toldaisai, we calculate the new moon. The new moon, if it's Noilad Kaidim Chatzais, if the new moon is seen before Chatzais, before the afternoon, then it's known, Shenire will be seen, Samach L'Shkia Zachama, you will be visible close to sunset. it. You will not be able to see it. We give a very, very simplistic explanation to something which is extremely, extremely complicated. That basically what happens over here is that whenever we have a new month, what happens? That the new moon appears between the earth and the sun, and therefore the moon is invisible, as the moon is, of course, a reflection of the sun. When it is invisible, that is when the new month begins. And when you start seeing the beginning crescent of the new moon, that is the beginning of the new month. So you have one point in time where you see the old moon, the last crescent, then it's invisible, and then you'll see the new month. Rashi here explains that there's going to be 6 hours are the number that we need to know. That after 6 hours of not seeing a new moon, you'll see the crescent. That's the moila. That is when the new moon is being born. And when the Gemara now goes to explain to us that what does it mean? Laila v'yomin ha'chaydesh. Rashi explains a very famous line. We'll highlight the Rashi. Rashi says, of course we know that in halacha, the day in Jewish law, the day follows the night. And therefore, explains Rashi, that if you saw the old moon at night getting smaller, if last night you see a little crescent of the moon, the next day can't be the new moon, because it's impossible that in one 24-hour time block, we're going to have new and old. It can't be. So if last night you saw the crescent, it can't be the new moon in the morning. And therefore, explains Rav Zera, that if it's noilad before Chatzais, if I see the new moon before Chatzais, then it must be that at Shkia, I'm going to be able to see, whereas if I saw it after Chatzais, I'm not going to be able to see. Again, for the simple reason, it takes 6 hours from the blank no moon to the new moon. The time between before and after is a 6-hour time difference. Says the Gemara, who cares? Beautiful astronomy. You need this to try to mess up the Eidim, to make sure the Eidim are telling the truth. Meaning, if Eidim tell you a story and they start telling you last night, yeah, we saw the crescent of the old moon, and then this morning we saw the new moon, you know that they're lying, because that is a physical impossibility. The Gemara here, according to Rashi, is teaching you the physical din of the astrology, exactly when you will see the new moon. We'll see if 2 more lines, then we'll call it a day. Amar Rav Zera, Amar Rav Nachman. That was statement number 1. Now Rav Zera says in the name of Rav Nachman, Esrim va'arba chavtal l'shay michsi sadi. The moon is invisible for a full 24 hours. L'didan nishisme etika. L'didan. To us in Bavel, how does it look? There's a 24-hour time block. So there's 6 hours of the old moon being invisible. Now there's 18 hours of the new moon being invisible. In Eretz Yisrael, in Eretz Yisrael, it's invisible for 6 hours of the new moon, and 18 hours of the old moon. Ask the Gemara, the same reason. We're going to stop over here just to point out that the big question on this last piece of Gemara is that in science it doesn't really work. It's seeming the Gemara just made it seem to believe that between Eretz Yisrael and Bavel there's this massive, massive difference. That one you can have 6 hours of the old moon, the other one you can have 6 hours of the new moon. And the problem is that Eretz Yisrael and Bavel are not that far. Therefore, there should not be such a tremendous difference. And as we pointed out, this was the basic, most bare-bone, basic shot according to Rashi telling us when the new moon is going to be visible in order so that we know if the Eidim are telling the truth, whereas other Rishonim learn this Gemara completely differently. We'll pick it up from Amar Mar Mir Hashem tomorrow.